Everyone, and welcome to REKT Vision. I believe this is episode 3 or 4.
4 if you count the drinks, but yeah, we've been doing it every week for the last 4 weeks for sure.
Yeah, today's topic is banana zone or boredom zone. I think last week we probably had a plethora of positive crypto headlines that almost felt like it was too much to digest, and that's now resulted in us having a week of basically nothing. Barely any price action, barely any headlines. What's your feel this Friday as we head out to close out this week?
Yeah, depressing, right? Really felt as though last week was going to be a very, very big week for us, and just feels like the wind has come out the sails of the market slightly, which has definitely surprised me. I just felt like there was just a crazy amount of bullish headlines last week, and I think it is 14 days of straight inflows now, which is another crazy high figure. And seemingly we just haven't been able to break through all-time high on Bitcoin. ETH kind of retreated from the 4K level, and Solana is still hanging out in the 160s. So definitely has been disappointing for people in the market. We've now been in this sideways chop for months now, really, since kind of the end of March. And I think everyone's just waiting for us to break through that like 71.5 area, which we 71.5K area, which we've been breaking through, nearly broke through a few times, but haven't been able to recently. So this kind of reminds me of last year. Like, you remember this from being crypto day in, day out, is that you can sometimes have these long periods of chop sideways, and you can do silly things in those chop periods. And the majority of your returns are often in a very, very short period. So that's what I think here, is that this chop is continuing. I'm very, very bullish still. I still think we're going to hit all-time highs very, very soon, or at least within the next couple of months, we should be pushing on to much higher levels. But you can really hurt yourself and chasing momentum when this sort of market happens.
Yeah, I agree. It's just frustrating, isn't it? Like, it's almost like we had too much information and too many news headlines last week, and everyone just kind of was like, whoa, that's like way too much to digest. And now it's all just blown over a little bit, and people are like, I don't really know what to do here. But it's not been a great week for macro either. Like, stocks are definitely lower this week. Rates are up a little bit. I know we had PCE data today, which came in line, so that was good from an inflation standpoint, and weaker GDP data. So you would think those things would paint a more dovish tape, but it hasn't really transpired, at least into traditional markets, and it certainly hasn't crossed over into crypto markets. But I don't know. It feels like to me, remember when BlackRock first applied for their ETF back in almost a year ago? It's around June last year, and we had this little pop, and then crypto just did nothing for months. Actually, it just did nothing for months, even though that information was out there and known within the market. So it could be one of those things. It could be like, people just are slow to react to the news, and maybe there's obviously some sell programs going on, and there's all the Mt. Gox stuff that hit headlines over the weekend as well. So I don't know, like, it could just be a delayed reaction. At least I hope it will be. I think I've lost you on audio, by the way. I don't know if you're muted or not.
Sorry, I muted myself.
Yep.
Yeah, like, I think that reminds me as well of what it was like last year. It was 270 days or something like that of basically chop. And I think everyone would have done better just holding Bitcoin during that period. And it feels like you could have a similar sort of case here, where you can get very, very cut up chasing momentum, like chasing a breakout. And the best thing is just to hold spot. I mean, going forward, it is crazy, because I did just think that last week was just so positive to see ETH get called basically a security, and then to see the ETFs and see crypto become a mainstream policy issue. And like you said, even the data this week has been relatively dovish. Yeah, stocks are slightly lower, but if rates are the thing that people have been scared about, then you had lower inflation, slightly lower growth, and it just feels as though we should have supportive monetary policy at least coming, or at least more supportive monetary policy. You have printing going on throughout Asia. It just feels as though, yeah, this should be the sort of environment that we really push through, but we haven't really. It's been nearly or just around 2 billion of inflows over the last 14 days, which is high. It's not crazy high. Each day it's kind of between 50 to 100. Interestingly, saw BlackRock, which has now overtaken GBTC, so maybe that'll be a slightly better scenario. We're starting to see the end of those sort of outflows. The two things I think caught the market off guard this week was the movement in the Mt. Gox Bitcoin. And now Mt. Gox is one of the first crypto exchanges which basically went through a hack and then went down, and then they managed to retrieve a bunch of Bitcoin which hasn't been paid back, and it's in the billions. I think it's just shy of 10 billion worth of Bitcoin, and interestingly, it was done before the hard fork, so you have like Bitcoin Cash as well. But they're having to distribute that, and that will be later this year. Although every single year they say it's going to be this year, and it hasn't yet been paid. And there were some movements on those wallets this week, although it doesn't look like it's going to be imminently sold. It did remind people that that they've still got a lot of Bitcoin there to sell, which I think spooked the market slightly. And then I think the Trump headlines as well, probably, like part of the rally, I think has probably been an expectation, that Trump would get into power and that you would see a broad-based rally across risk assets, very similar to last time. And that, I think, has spooked the market slightly. They just don't like volatility. They don't like uncertainty. And with the conviction this week, I think his chances, at least on the poly market side, went down from like 54 to like 52 or something like that, although it's bouncing around those sort of levels. But I think interestingly for crypto, it just probably leads to more division in the US. And what we really need in the US is bipartisan support for crypto regulation, crypto policy. And this probably points us towards a slightly more divisive political setup in the US. And that's just not good for crypto, because we definitely need everything to come together. So crypto perhaps underperformed on both of those things, which means we haven't broken through this week. I'm still bullish. Next month we do have the ETH ETF coming, so maybe we see that lead the market. What do you think? What are you looking for in terms of things that could maybe take us to the next level?
ETH ETF is a bit of a tricky one, because my thought was if we had a big delay in between when it was approved and when the ETFs actually started trading, that would be the most bullish thing. My fear is that the volumes aren't great, and we know the volumes for the ETH ETF will be a lot smaller than they will be for Bitcoin, just by nature of the difference in market caps, right? And just by nature of the difference in volumes outside of ETF. So my fear is that just as a headline number, and when the average person compares the ETH number to the Bitcoin number, is that it may disappoint. And then there's obviously further room for disappointment then if the actual volumes are lower than expected. So, I don't see that. I mean, I guess it could also be good to the upside as well. So it does, that comment does go both ways, but I don't know. I'm not really sure that you would need you would need BlackRock to just pile a load in at the beginning and seed their ETF and do something similar as they did with the Bitcoin ETFs. And even with the Bitcoin ETFs, remember, they started trading and then there was some good volume at the beginning, and then it just died off a bit. Then it took some time to actually pick up and do well. And for ETH, I think there's going to have to be a big education program for potential buyers, because to understand Ethereum for someone who doesn't know anything about crypto is much more difficult than understanding Bitcoin, I think. So we'll see. So I'm not sure if that's going to necessarily be a positive catalyst. And it may just be that everyone in crypto is thinking the same way as I am, and then those volumes come and they're really good, and then it goes higher. So I'm not really sure there. I do think I'm more bullish on rate cuts. I think there's a good chance we'll see rate cuts within the next couple of months, because data continues to be conducive to rate cuts. I think that would be much more bullish, have a much more bullish impact for markets, both TradFi and crypto, especially just a surprise rate cut at the next Fed meeting. It's maybe too early, but I think the next Fed meeting is middle of June, which may be a little bit too early, but you never know. There's that probability of a surprise rate cut is definitely higher now than it was a month ago, I would say. So that I think could be a positive thing. And I do think the continued political focus will be a positive thing as well. Like that's not going to be the last time we've heard from either Trump or Biden on crypto. And I just think even those guys talking about it is pretty bullish overall for it. But if that's a longer term thing, you know, that's going to be a gradual thing that builds up into November over the next 5 or 6 months or whatever it is. So, I'm constructive as well, but you know, it's harder to pick out these like specific things, I think.
Yeah, you just assume with these sort of inflows each day that we'd continue to like grind higher, but it does feel as though we're searching a little bit for a broader narrative in crypto. But like last week, I don't think we could have asked for a better narrative than last week. That's what's really surprised me. It kind of feels like it being a political issue really does change things for crypto ahead of the election. I don't know how you can be bearish. And yeah, I think we may see slight like rate cuts in the US. Feels as though we're definitely going to see them in Europe. It's really just a case of how many in Europe. We're definitely going to see them in the UK, and then, I mean, China's printing money to save the chip industry, the property market. So is broadly all of Asia at the moment. So it does feel as though global liquidity is going higher. This is kind of like the banana zone thesis that things are just going up only because global liquidity is going to go up only. So I don't think we have to get necessarily scared this time. Like there's enough there on the table that if we were to rally, we'd all be like, okay, well, there's tons of reasons to be bullish crypto right now. It just surprised me that we've been kind of in this chop for a little bit longer. Maybe we do. Like, I don't think it's a sort of market where you should be scared about us going to like 50K. I saw today someone put on the timeline like, oh, you know, if we lose this level, we'll go down to like 64K, and I was like, who really cares? Like, if we go to 64K, it's a 5% move in Bitcoin. You're probably talking about a 10-15% move in certain altcoins. Does anyone really mind? Like, it just feels as though that's the sort of thing that would shake out even more people, and then we just roof back. So I would be very, very scared about getting shaken out in this sideways chop. And I do think it's probably a period where majors outperform, having probably underperformed certain sectors for a little bit here. So what do you think about that? Like, do you think it's a time where you should probably be consolidating into majors, or are you sticking to like max meme coin bag?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot because the big meme coins, at least, maybe not all meme coins, but the headline stuff like Pepe, Whiff, a couple of other things are up a lot in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And at least for me, they've just ended up, have now become a larger part of my portfolio again because of those moves. So it's just like, you know, can those keep going up, or is it time to take the chips off there and move into majors? The thing about majors is I think most people think or believe, and we're kind of seeing it now, is that they're just chopping. They're just chopping. And that tends to be a good environment for meme coins because people get bored in majors and they feel more comfortable about, like, you know, best gambling their soul or gambling their ETH for memes and stuff like that. So I do think, you know, there's that to consider. And we've seen meme coins start to rally when majors are usually quiet. So I don't know. It's a tough one. I'm not really sure what to do here because everything in my head, my mid-curve head tells me take some chips off the table. You know, the stuff's up a lot recently. You know, some stuff that earns like a 3-4x in the last couple of weeks on things that I was thinking of selling when they weren't 3 or 4x higher. So I should really reduce them, but it's the classic thing. Once they're up 4x, you're like, oh my God, but I could go to like this level or I can go to this level. And it's just a case of being disciplined, I think. So I don't know. I'm feeling like I'm still really bullish.
You know what I mean? I think you've had quite lucky in those bags. Like, I think this has been a market where a lot of people have felt a lot of pain. You know, Bitcoin is gone from 70, it's stayed in this range, but ETH has done all right. Solana's kind of moved lower, and most altcoins are kind of lower over this period. It's really just been certain meme coins that have done well in this environment, but it's definitely not been a pretty market, I think, for most crypto enthusiasts, I would say.
What about you? What if you had to own, let's say, like 5 coins for the next 2 weeks, what would you own across anything?
Yeah, I'm definitely. I mean, I only own probably a small amount of coins, but I've definitely consolidated into majors. Um, Interestingly, between the three of them right now, I I prefer to still play my ETH beta via memes, but Solana I think is going to do well here just as a base chain, just because of like the amount of churn there is and all the different meme coins there and all the activity. Like it just feels as though that one's still an unloved story. Interestingly, you saw this week though that the CME might not be moving forward with the Solana ETF, and one of the reasons there was a futures ETF. This is because it went down for that period this year. So even that story feels like it could be a little bit longer to play out. But I've definitely consolidated a lot of bags back into majors, and I think they're probably going to outperform for a decent amount here. Like last week, we said that I'm more bullish on ETH and Solana over Bitcoin. I still am. I still prefer both of those stories over Bitcoin right now. But I do think that that I'm there. Bitcoin I prefer to most other altcoins right now. I don't believe in like a broader altcoin story here, at least for the next like 2 or 3 weeks. I think this doesn't really feel like that sort of market. This feels like a choppy sort of market where maybe some meme coins do a 10x, and if you're lucky you get them. But I think a lot of people will lose money trying to chase some of these stories while we chop sideways.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think where my head's at now, it's like with the rally we've had in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think if I didn't take profits and we dropped, I would be annoyed with myself. But that is not mutually exclusive to the fact that I still think all the headlines we've had are max bullish for crypto. So I think it's a case for me. It's just like, okay, let's just take some, take 10, 20, 30% profits or something like that and still leave like a big position on for if we do get this great big rally. But I think that great big rally may require more patience. And that's a tough one.
Definitely need more patience. So in terms of the other stuff, I mean, we spoke about the it becoming a political issue, and Trump now, in fact, is being advised by the Bitcoin Magazine team, which is fairly wild. He's moved
Advice on what? Just like for his crypto policies and stuff?
Crypto policy. Like part of the reason that they said that he said that he would pardon or at least end Ross Ulbricht, who is in jail for tornado. No, sorry, not tornado case. Silk Road.
Yeah,
was because apparently the Bitcoin Magazine team advised him to do that. But it's to see that, and then there was talk yesterday that Trump and Elon were talking, that Biden was reaching out to certain leaders in the cryptocurrency space. Like it's becoming even more of a political issue than it was last week. And you're definitely seeing a softening of the current administration's position, it feels like, as this becomes more popular. So that's been bullish. You saw huge payment providers as well announce new moves into crypto. You saw PayPal announcing that they are going to move their stablecoin onto Solana, and that you could also see a layer of secrecy around transfers there, which I think people, or privacy at least around transfers there, which would be very bullish. And then you saw MasterCard building like a payments network on Bitcoin, which as well seemed like a relatively large institutional move into the space. So yeah, it still feels as though we're starting to see big institutional moves. And then this week you also saw some, I know, the beginnings of potentially a retail style move. You saw a bunch of different celebrities start to move into the space and launch coins. Interestingly, Kris Jenner is perhaps the most well-known celebrity to do that, but meme coins has started to go a bit more mainstream, kind of similar to how NFTs did at the start of the last cycle. You started to see a few NFT drops very early on, and they kind of crashed and burned. And that was mid 2021, and we did kind of a 3 or 4x even after that. So that made me think that we were on the precipice of stuff starting to go a bit more mainstream. What did you make of all those stories? Like, do you feel as though we're going to get adoption this cycle more than we've seen so far?
The adoption story for this cycle feels optically a lot weaker and smaller than it did for last cycle. And I don't know if that's a reflection of where we are in this cycle or the fact that NFTs were just a much easier concept for the average person to grasp than crypto and meme coins are. So, I think that all the celebrity stuff, I mean, my comments have been pretty clear about it on Twitter and stuff, but I just think this is not mass adoption. Like, if a celebrity is really curious and wants to learn about the space and get involved for genuine reasons, the first thing they do is not to just launch a meme coin, right? The first thing you do is maybe buy stuff or participate in the space and ask questions or whatever it is, right? To come in and immediately launch a meme coin, I think, is a pretty clear indicator of your intentions. Last cycle, we saw a lot of celebrities come in and drop NFTs, and you had Paris Hilton, etc. And it was kind of a similar thing. They were very like cash grab type NFTs where they just thought they could sell things and walk away and not face any reputational damage. But it just felt like we had more adoption there. Like you had more people getting involved, and it was easier to explain to people the idea of a profile picture, or the idea of a piece of digital art. Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
like everyone hated NFTs, right? Like, why would you right-click save as? Was still the strong narrative.
They did, but like I think people, you had this whole like metaverse concept as well, and I think people were understanding that. So, and that felt relatively new then. So I think this time around, it's much easier to explain to someone, oh, this idea of like the metaverse, virtual reality, and you have your PFP or you have your 3D avatar, and this is like you in this world. Compared to, oh, hey, this is like a meme coin for someone, and it doesn't have any value, but it does have value, and you just trade it, and there are memes that are made. Like that's a much harder thing to explain, I think, to someone who's not market savvy. So I think the adoption argument this year is much, much weaker. It feels much weaker. And again, that may be a reflection of where we are in the cycle, but I don't feel like we're early in the cycle still. I feel like we're at least halfway, if not more, in terms of time, not necessarily in terms of price, but in terms of time. And so, yeah, I don't, it doesn't feel like we're getting the same thing this time around. I don't know. What it feels like now we are getting is like people coming to trade meme coins when they hear their friends make money on meme coins, and that's a casino, really. It's not necessarily a mass adoption for everyone. It's not mass adoption because it's not for everyone. Going to a casino is not for everyone, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm not really buying the mass adoption argument so far this year.
It does, like I would agree with you that when 2021 happened and all these celebrities came in, then at least the first wave, let's say first half of that, we did see more mainstream adoption kind of out the gate. But we didn't then peak for another 18 months. It was still a big move up after that. And I think what this says to me is I still think we have a decent amount of time. That's what I took away from it, is that suddenly you're starting to see a product here which people are starting to potentially understand a bit more. I agree with you on like the morality of it all. Like I think everyone could kind of see through the situation here. But at the same time, what I did see is that crypto starting to become a bit more mainstream again, and that might be where 18 months kind of is where we might still have in this cycle. Like the bull run started in 2020, right? And similarly, this feels like we've started it 6 months ago, let's say. And we've probably still got another 18 months, in my opinion. But it can get a little bit more silly, I think, from now on. Like that for me, when I saw it, I was like, a lot of people saw it as a top signal. And interestingly, we did have a little bit of a mini top in like the first half of 2021, and then everything just went gangbusters for that period onwards. So I'm still, this is nowhere near the top, and this to me still feels like the best way for normie adoption. You saw again, Pump.fun have record revenue again on the day that Caitlyn Jenner released her coin. So I think that's proves that we're kind of still this still feels like the best product for it. At least this is what we're going to see in terms of mainstream retail trading. And then you have like the more serious stuff like stablecoin adoption, transfers, which I think will just form the backbone, like the real use case, which kind of continues for much longer afterwards. I don't know if you've seen the article which PayPal wrote about Solana, but it was wild. Very, very bullish on Solana being cheap, fast, being able to basically provide the backbone of their whole payments network. And I just thought that was very, very interesting to see one of the major payment providers that we've seen over the last like 20 years, let's say, be so all in on a new tech. And then MasterCard seems to be a bit more experimental, but definitely an interesting read if you have the chance to read the PayPal piece on Solana there. Just the way that they're thinking about it, people that have thought about these sort of payment networks for decades to come in and be that bullish on this seems just doesn't seem like something you should be even like considering fading. So yeah,
I'll make sure I read that one for sure.
Yeah, definitely one of the more bullish stuff I've read. But other than that, it was like a relatively quiet week for the left curve stuff. You had a lot of the ETH memes hit all-time highs, but then they've since kind of been dragged down. Today particularly seems like a weak day across the board for like all markets. And with all these celebrities coming in, there were some calls for like a short-term top. I guess it's kind of similar to the question that we said before, but were you thinking in your head that was the short-term top?
Just felt very toppy, didn't it? Like a little bit like a local top. And I mean, I always wonder, does something like that make people want to sell? And if all that stuff didn't happen, would we be higher than where we are now? I always ask myself these questions because I do think that kind of silly activity, in my opinion, does put people off. And if someone's on the fence or on the edge as to whether to sell or not, and they see just all that dumb stuff, they're like, okay, well, I'm just going to sell then. And it usually happens, people coming in for greed is usually a psychological indicator of like being at some kind of local top or even global top. So yeah, I mean, it did prove to be a local top, at least so far, in the context of the last week. Whether we go higher or lower from here, I'm not really sure, but it does. I mean, also when stuff like that, people go and gamble it, they lose, it becomes a liquidity drain. It's a transfer of liquidity, transfer of capital from people who are victims to people who are bad actors, and that's never good for an ecosystem because it means everything else in the ecosystem drops lower as people sell things to generate liquidity. So yeah, it could. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure some people lost money on the celebrity meme coins. I don't think it was like crazy amounts of money like we've seen in the past. But sentiment wise, it's not great, I think.
That's one thing I would argue against. Like, unlike the NFT mints, which used to take a lot more money actually directly, like these seem smaller, but I agree, it doesn't leave a good taste in the mouth. I think, as we've said several times, the growth of like active daily people who are investing in crypto doesn't seem to have gone sky high this cycle. You've had an increase. You've had people been using the tech potentially more, but not people who are like actively trading it increase that much. So when they get burned, it's been a little bit more painful. The one bright spot I would say in all of this has been the runes ecosystem, the ordinals ecosystem, which was kind of a hot narrative a month and a half ago, around the time of obviously the halving, and then didn't really shine that strongly, or at least had very, very high expectations, which just weren't really met. This week, you saw a big rebound in a bunch of different collections and coins there. Interestingly, Dogecoin, which has gone up to like $1 billion market cap, but all the major ordinals collections have also done a huge snapback. Most things are up about 30 to 50% on the week. What do you think about ordinals and runes here? Is that a buy? Like, it does feel as though as things have moved away from, let's say, degenning on ETH and Sol this week, that's really picked up the mantle, and people have started to move funds into there. And I do think that they're going to be around in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. So are they just long-term buy and holds, or is this the dip to buy?
I don't know. I personally think Ordinals and Runes, I mean, Ordinals have been around for a while, and I think they did well because Bitcoin was doing really well, and Bitcoin was the thing this year with all the ETFs and stuff. And now you do have a risk where if the ETF does well and people start looking at other stuff, then the focus leaves the Bitcoin ecosystem and moves into other things. So it wouldn't be my choice of asset to be long for the next 6 months, to be honest with you. I feel like I missed the first move, and I don't think we'll go. I don't feel like we're going to see the crazy heights beyond here for Ordinals like we saw for ETH, because there's still a lot of friction towards being able to buy stuff and sell stuff and transact. And it doesn't have that normie friendly vibe or aspect to it that I think ETH NFTs did. So it's not where I would put my chips, to be honest with you, if I was looking for high beta stuff. It wouldn't be Ordinals. Certainly wouldn't be Runes. Sorry to disappoint.
Yeah. I'm a lot more constructive on it. I think those things are going to last. I think it's more difficult to work out which ones, but I do think some of these are going to be huge. I think if you're bullish on Bitcoin, then I think these things are going to be higher beta versions of playing the Bitcoin trade. A lot of them, just like they were earlier this year. It's just that I think they've gone as soon as Bitcoin started going sideways or lower, they started to deflate. I think you are going to have to be bailed out by Bitcoin going higher. But if Bitcoin goes to 100K, I think these can absolutely fly. Some of these.
But what if, remember when ETH would rally a lot and NFTs would go lower? Like, do you see that impact happening for Bitcoin and Ordinals?
These are liquid tokens. This is far more like Whiff rallying if Sol rallies, or if Pepe rallies, if ETH rallies. Like, I think if these
Runes are still not easy to buy, right? Like, the reason why Pepe is going crazy because people are thinking maybe there's a Coinbase listing and it's really easy to buy on any exchange. Like, it's not easy to buy Runes. And so how do you get,
if I'm honest, that to me that says they are going to get listed. You've seen BRC20s get listed, big listing cycle from Binance, and Dog is the 8th largest meme coin in the world and hasn't been listed on a ton of different exchanges. I would say that right now seems like a bullish thing, because these things will get listed, in my opinion, if it proves itself to be the dominant liquid token standard on Bitcoin, then it will get listed. So I like some of those stories. I think it's difficult to work out which of the ones to get involved in. It's kind of just one which is really pulled away from all the others, which is this dog coin. But then you have a few others which are kind of behind it. Some related to the Bitcoin puppets, which have come up very, very strong this cycle, and then RSIC, which is one of the original ordinal inscriptions. But I think, or rune inscriptions even. But yeah, I like these stories. I do think that they got beaten up very badly, and then they've come back very strong. But I do think they can be long-term holds. For me, they've now become one of the best Bitcoin beaters again. I think Bitcoin comes back. At least I'm definitely not bearish on Bitcoin. So yeah, that's where I'm looking at some of the left curve stuff. Again, it does feel as though some of that stuff could easily do 2, 3, 4x.
Yeah.
The other stuff which really picked up was the political meme coins. Like, you saw all the Trump related coins do a huge move. Have you got any risk on those? You've been looking at those?
No, it's annoying because I felt like at the beginning of the year, I very clearly realized that's where I should have some risk, and I never put any risk on because the other stuff I held was doing pretty well. And looking at the return profiles, it's been pretty similar. So I haven't felt the need to, it's like, I thought the other day about buying Trump, and I decided to buy Pac-Man on Blast, and Pac-Man still did a 4 or 5x, and Trump did like a 2 or 3x. So it's like, from a return standpoint, I think they continue to do really well. But I feel like unless I would go into it with a large amount of capital, like I need to put in a large amount for the 2 or 3 or 4x to be exciting for me. then I just wouldn't have a need to get involved. I feel like if it's one of those things where if I got in really early into Trump, for example, or Boredom, and I had a huge bag, then I would be riding this stuff for sure. Because when you have a huge bag, even just a 2x is like a crazy amount of P&L. So I think just because I wasn't involved from the beginning, and now I think maybe you can still get a 10x out of some of these things. There's a very good chance you can, I think. But for that to happen, you would still need to have a very strong crypto backdrop as well anyway. In which case other coins would be up quite a lot as well anyway. I just don't feel like chasing it here. But that being said, if we do have a big drop on everything, all the political stuff, I think I would consider getting involved.
One thing that I've just realized is that these metas get run up so quickly. Like a new piece of news comes out and some people react to it, and then some people just go into pump.fun, and some of these moves go to hundreds of millions in days. Like MAGA, which is a coin on Solana, moved crazy over the last week, and Trump is obviously is a coin on ETH which has gone to like $700 million market cap. It does just feel as though you have to be, you could be very, very early to some of these huge moves still. But I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of trading in these things ahead of the election.
Should we do some questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, this is from John from the Real Vision website. He's, following on from what we just spoke about, he's curious on our thought on the meme coin craze, with platforms like Pump.fun making it easy to create new meme coins and the sheer volume of them this cycle. Do you think we're heading towards a meme coin fatigue? Could we be in for a quick super cycle?
I think no. I think this is going to be a long-term trend in people using it. I do think that you will get dilution in certain aspects, but I think it's a good product. At the end of the day, like you strip everything back, it's just financialization of memes, and that as a product will do well, in my opinion. So yeah, I think you can play the short term, long term. Like we haven't seen enough people come in, and then things will fall down. But I think that could be the backbone of a lot of different of activity on a lot of different chains, in my opinion.
Fair enough. All right, this one's from Peter. Do you put much weight on using fractals? He's noticed similarities in a number of different cryptos. In particular, if you look at Opal now versus the Cardano chart in 2019 to 2021 fractal, he says some people have warned him against using them, but he sees others using them to predict possible next moves in stocks and crypto. So do you have any thoughts on fractals?
I've looked at them before, just like I look at a lot of different technical indicators, but I don't have a trading strategy around them at all. I'm not a big believer in these sort of things having huge amounts of predictive power unless everyone believes that is an important technical indicator. So if you're the only person using them, or you're one of the very, very few people using them, then I feel like they're not going to have a huge amount of predictive power.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are some things that look more, when you compare fractals, and sometimes it's like, oh, this must be more than a coincidence. And I think often it is, because it's a good way to explain maybe the psychology of what happened in that chart at a particular moment in time, and something similar happened afterwards. But as a predictive measure, I think it's very difficult to use. Like I would never trade on using fractals. I just think it's an interesting thing to maybe look at. And that's generally my view on technical analysis as well, anyway. This question is from Lloyd on the Real Vision website. Can OSF talk about his thesis for swapping his soul to Whiff? Does the thesis still stand despite the ongoing chop? Yeah, I think the reason why I did it was because last week Pepe had a huge move. I think it basically doubled in market cap all the way to about $6 or $7 billion in market cap. And there's one thing to say, well, it's ETH beta and you have the whole ETH ETF stuff, and that's definitely the main reason why it moved. But then there's another angle to look at, which is like, everyone knows meme coins have been strong this year and they've dominated a lot of attention. And you could view Whiff as the Sol beta and Pepe as the ETH beta, but you could also view Pepe as a meme coin and Whiff as a meme coin. And that's what I was thinking of. I was like, well, some people are like, oh wow, there's been a massive move in Pepe. What's next to catch up? And the next thing down is Whiff. So that was the main reason why I moved from Sol to Whiff. And I also felt that if ETH would become a big narrative in the next few weeks, then Sol would struggle and could struggle. But Whiff could do better on the whole meme coin narrative, which I think will just continue to exist for the remainder of the cycle. So that was the main reason for swapping. Does the thesis still stand despite ongoing chop? Well, I swapped it just below 3. I think it went all the way to about 4, and now it's hovering around 3.5. So there's an argument to say that a lot of that move has already happened. But I still like that trade. I think, if it moves up if it moves up a bit more, then maybe I would take some off and keep the original amount of Whiff that I had. But it was just, it just seemed obvious to me that it would catch up to Pepe, basically.
Yeah, it's not been a good move today. Not at 3.5 anymore. It's definitely gotten, and the market's getting smoked actually as we're doing this.
3.2.
3.2. But I did a similar move actually, but it was really because I think Coinbase is going to start listing a lot more coins, in my opinion. The ETH ETF is really will allow them to do that, and I think they're going to list Pepe and Whiff in the short term.
Okay, next question. This is from One Bob for All on YouTube. ARK Invest is working to create a benchmark for measuring decentralization. What characteristics would you use in such an index? That's a good question.
Wow. That's a very difficult question to ask.
Yeah.
The general sense of it is like number of validators. I think the Satoshi Nakamoto, the Nakamoto coefficient is like the main way that people often look at decentralization, but it can be, there are like different ways that can be flawed. I don't know. I'd actually like to see what they're going to do. I think what people have been confused about with ETH and been caught off guard with is a lot of the TVL is moving to L2s. I think we need to have a better sense of decentralization with L2s. So a lot of the TVL and the activity of ETH is now having on L2s, which are not that decentralized and have huge bits of centralization in things like the sequencer or other aspects of it, particularly as roll-up as a service providers become bigger. So I think what I would look for is some sort of measure of not just of the network, but of the L2 network as well, because I think that's what is being missed with the current analysis.
Yeah, I don't know what else I would check away from the number of validators. You could maybe think about look at the history of like big events for blockchain and see if there's anything that could have been fixed with better decentralization or better structuring. But yeah, I'm not sure what else I would check. That would be the main one for me, I think. And I'm sure like loads of blockchain experts are probably just yelling their heads off at me now, saying it's not all about just the number of validators. But
well, it'd be things like the sequencer, like I just said. It may look at things like downtime. So yeah. Whether how many single points of failure it has in different aspects of the network. At the moment, Solana only has one client, right? So people say, although it has a high Nakamoto coefficient, it still has a single point of failure in certain aspects. So although we are not devs, I'm sure that's what you would be looking at, like certain single points of failure and whether those can be decentralized other than just validators.
I guess also like distribution of holders, right? Distribution of holders and how concentrated portions of holdings are as well. The argument against Bitcoin has often been, well, it's fully decentralized, but a large amount of the supply is owned by a few amount of people, so it doesn't trade like something that's decentralized. So that's maybe another thing as well to consider.
Yeah, and stakers as well. Like remember, we have
stakers as well. Yeah,
we have staking and restaking. So people have looked for centralization in things like EigenLayer and in Lido. So yeah, I would look for decentralization measures of that as well.
Next question. This is from MB on YouTube. do you consolidate the number of coins you're in, even if it means taking losses on the coins you're getting out of?
Depends on the period, really. Like right now, I just said I've definitely consolidated my book to just a few very, very core trades. And a lot of it has moved back into majors recently. So right now it's more consolidated than it has been. But I think during a bull move, or at least when things start to feel like more like a bull market, a lot of things can do 10x quite quickly. So you can play a few more trades, I think, than right now.
I personally do that all the time. Like I think, and the question on even if it means taking losses on your coins, I think I consolidate more when I've faced multiple losses across a few things. Like I find when I'm having a bad P&L period and I'm facing losses on a few different things, it just means my positioning overall in my book and my portfolio is not great. And it means if I'm annoyed about it, it also means I'm in things that I don't have full conviction on. So I will often, I only run very small positions now, but back when I used to trade at Barclays, I would often just take losses across like 10, 15, 20 different positions, consolidate everything to just 5 to 10 positions and restart basically. And that for me was always a really good way to break a money losing spell, to break like a negative P&L spell. I felt like after that, it was like I was reborn and then I could, go out there and restart again. So
yeah,
I would definitely recommend that.
Our old boss used to make us do that a lot. We have the same old boss. So yeah, we are generally big believers in consolidated portfolios, big bets on smaller numbers of things.
Yeah. All right, 2 more questions. This one's from Enlighten Up on the Real Vision website. What indicators, for example, the pi cycle top or macro signals, do you use to assess tops, and how do you recommend scaling out?
Do you want to answer that one? I don't actually have huge macro indicators of tops, at least technical indicators of tops. For me, I do have a strategy for getting out, which is kind of like a T-bot scenario where I feel as though certain macro things feel a little bit toppy from my perspective. But no, I don't have like this one indicator. And I think if you're looking for that, you're going to probably, again, like I said before, you're probably going to get hurt. When I look at the last like tops, let's say, which were COVID and before that, maybe like some of the tops around the Euro crisis in 2008, they all feel like they were driven by things that were relatively well telegraphed, apart from COVID. So I feel as though you can kind of feel the sense of when. I would guess credit spreads is perhaps not a bad one to look at, that I would look at, but I wouldn't look at technical indicators. I would look at more fundamental things as potential drivers of tops.
Yeah, I agree. I personally don't think there are any good technical indicators to look at, because if there were, you could just have algos to do it all for you and time the top every single time, and no one would need to trade, and that doesn't exist. I do think there are quite a few fundamental things to look out for. I think for this cycle, the thing to be worried about is potentially inflation again. Like if you have a Trump victory for the US, it would be great, I think, for risk assets initially, but the big fear there would be inflation going back up again. And I think that's the kind of moment where you can maybe see a potential top forming. It's like stocks are already at all-time highs. Bitcoin is hovering around all-time highs, and we probably rally into that. And if he goes ahead and wins, we probably have this great euphoric risk asset rally. But then the next few things and developments, I think, could be concerning. So that's like going to be a big, I think, moment in time and a potential point of inflection. And I think you need to just look at economic data. Like we are hoping right now that inflation stays low and the Fed starts cutting and is able to, preserve this soft landing scenario. We don't have any economic troubles, but the risk is that they're too late and stuff starts dropping. Payrolls start dropping off meaningfully, or GDP starts to become very weak, or they're too early and inflation starts picking up again once they start cutting. So if you see those numbers start to change, like right now the trend has been pretty good because economic data has been strong and inflation has stayed relatively low, and we're now starting to see economic data become weaker while inflation stays low. So there hasn't been any signs that things are changing, but I think if one of those things got out of whack and started to show a trend of getting out of whack, that's when I think we would have some room for concern. If you think about 2021 and the end of 2021, we just had like inflation go a little bit higher, then a little bit higher, then a little bit higher. And the Fed was like, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to do anything. And then the moment when they were like, oh shit, like it's getting out of control now. We need to start raising rates. I think that ended up being the top, but you had the signs of it happening beforehand, I think. So I think it's still the same stuff. And to be honest with you, I feel like the US monetary policy aspect of the markets has been the biggest thing for a long time now, for many years. Like that's the thing that we've always been looking out for like the last decade, whether it was what they're going to do to help protect COVID, like what they're going to do, when you had the whole like financial crisis stuff and the Eurozone crisis and all this kind of stuff, like what happens with rates is just so important. And I think when numbers change and the trend changes, that's usually a good indicator, I think. All right. You're muted, by the way.
It's a good point that you made that inflation might be the thing that derails us. I think the main risk here would be if inflation really starts to pick up again. Oil prices have come down meaningfully, but most other metal prices are heading towards highs at the moment. You have other random food prices which are hitting inflation right now. I think it's El Nino for the next few years, so you should have weather disruptions. If we start to see inflation pick up again and the narrative comes back, the Fed's going to have to raise rates. Let's say Trump gets in and everyone gets super bullish. I do think that could get a little bit scary, maybe second half of 2025. So that goes back to this kind of 18 months period where we probably still have 18 months left.
Yeah. All right. Last question. This is from Sri on the Real Vision website. Can you guys give your view on WorldCoin? And do you know why some on-ramps like Crypto.com have delisted this coin? I wasn't actually aware they had delisted it.
My view on WorldCoin is it is not my favorite coin. It is the FTV. I need to double check on it, but it is absolutely crazy. Probably rivaling the
$47 billion FTV.
Right. And that was at the top. Actually, at the top, it was closer to 100. So it was rivaling OpenAI. I don't know about this sort of stuff. Like there's different attempts to basically put your identity on the blockchain. I think there's one which launched even last week, which is going to do it via fingerprints rather than retina scans. At the moment, that coin feels as though, and just speaking to people even in crypto, they're in it because Sam Altman is a co-founder.
Yeah.
I don't think many people are like, oh my God, this is going to be the thing. So I'm not a big fan. And I think it's already got a very high valuation. So I don't think that's like a 2x or a 3x even possibility. So for me, feels like one of those ones that I would probably exit.
Yeah, it felt like we had that great big pump because it was just like buzzwords all lumped together into one thing that created a narrative, and people were like, "Oh, AI, Sam Altman, coins, like WorldCoin." like it seemed like that was OpenAI. It seemed like that was the reason for the rally, and then the AI narrative kind of died down a bit again, at least in terms of crypto. Why it's been delisted, I'm not sure. I mean, that is surprising to me, but
it's been banned in a number of different countries. I think Hong Kong maybe even moved to ban it, like because obviously they're using retina scans of people, and there's been some talk about like restrictions on privacy as well as being scared about how the data will be used, as well as like abuse of certain, I would say, lower income countries. So a lot of different countries have moved to put up bans against it. I think some of the Iberian countries, Spain, I think did. Some of the South American countries have, and I think I saw Hong Kong had as well. So I think it's probably that they're just scared about this thing running into local restrictions.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, yeah, I think that's it. We managed to fill up an hour almost, even though not a lot happened last week. I hope more happens next week, and I hope it's more that happens for the benefit of crypto prices and not the other way around, because it feels like we're at this little point of inflection here.
And we weren't good this week, right? We weren't good for crypto prices. I think we went on air and then everything dropped like 5-6%. So hopefully everything rebounds.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, that was REKT Vision. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. You can follow us on X, OSF_REKT, REKT Mando, and Real Vision. Next week, we are going to have the exclusive AMA and drink session, which will be on the Real Vision website. So if you guys want to have the chance to view that, sign up to Real Vision Crypto, which is realvision.com/RVC to be able to access that. We'll have some drinks, maybe have a couple of drinks for next week, and hopefully we won't be drowning our sorrows. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next Friday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, which is also 4:30 p.m. British Summer Time. Thanks everyone.